Hey, everybody, welcome back to Remotely Serious, your source for new perspectives on digital nomadism, global mobility, remote work, and in the case of this episode, the movement of sovereign individuals around the world, which is a concept that's adjacent to the other concepts I mentioned. I'm your host, Curtis Duggan, and I'm here to help you navigate the new frontiers of remote work and remote life. Today's episode is an interview with a guest named Alex Recouso. He is an entrepreneur with a startup called Baseflow. And Baseflow is a platform for helping people move and, in many cases, immigrate and get a visa to go around the world. And this is a concept that's obviously very important to digital nomads, remote workers, and sovereign individuals, a concept that we'll discuss on the pod. So we'll talk about his startup Baseflow, but I also thought it was interesting later on in the pod, we also talk about his time in Montenegro at a pop-up city called Zuzalu. And so if what I just said doesn't make sense to you at all, we'll get into it on the pod. Here we go. All right, I'm here with Alex Recouso from Baseflow, founder of Baseflow. I was looking at I think it was LinkedIn or something, and I know that you can explain a little bit more about what Baseflow does, but one phrase stuck out to me, and I think it's from the LinkedIn. You know how you have a little caption, and it said building a society of sovereign individuals, and that stuck out to me. I've heard that phrase a lot. I can't say that I've researched it quite as much. I see it on Twitter, but I was wondering if we wanted to start there. This is the Remotely Serious podcast. So we're interested in remote work, but it's like there's these even deeper political movements like sovereign individual. And so I saw that and I wanted to start there. What does that mean?
Hey Curtis, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. Super excited to be here. And yeah, probably you have read it also on Twitter because that's like the one liner that we have been using the most. And honestly, the background behind of it. Baseflow is essentially this platform that allows you to get a new passport or move your tax residency to remote and crypto friendly jurisdictions. And so, we start with Portugal. Now we're expanding to other jurisdictions like Montenegro, UAE, Singapore, also these citizenship by investment programs in the Caribbean islands. But essentially, what I see as the bigger vision is that we are enabling this society of sovereign individuals to form around the concept of basically choosing your governance providers and deciding things that I believe that you should be able to easily decide, like, hey, where do you want to pay taxes? Where do you want to be a citizen? And that kind of stuff.
What countries do you think there are any countries that are doing sovereign individualism or sovereign or welcoming sovereign individuals really, really well? Are there certain countries you've chosen for Baseflow first because you think they're very friendly to this? Or how do you make these decisions? You mentioned UAE, Singapore, Portugal. What goes into those decisions to choose which country
Yeah,
to help
that's
people move to?
that's a great question because so basically the countries that we are going with are the ones that have possibly both, but either they are remote friendly, meaning that they allow remote workers, digital nomads to move there and set up their affairs there, or countries that are really crypto friendly. And because like from our initial users, many of them, they either work in crypto or are invested into crypto and stuff like that. So I believe those are the ones that are feeling the problem the most and the most painful because the states or the countries that are lagging with crypto regulation, they are making it super painful for you to interact with the government. And basically, Baseflow is this sort of operating system that abstracts all the complexity from sovereign individuals to interact with countries and make all of these decisions. Um, and I think for making these decisions, it's also important to take into account the demand side. For example, we started with Portugal because it was one of the most demanded solutions for remote workers and digital nomads to move their tax residency to. We also started with, for example, the Caribbean islands because they are really popular. We already had the contacts there with the government agents and several agencies that are doing these legal structures. And for example, right now we are researching also the Greece digital nomad visa because it's also one of the most demanded solutions. I believe it's the fastest growing citizenship by investment program in the world right now. So you also have to take into account the demand side. That's something that we are really focusing on. But like you were saying, also taking into account which countries are friendly for sovereign individuals is quite important, because also we want to choose countries that we can keep working with in the long term. Uh, for example, in Portugal, things changed a bit this year. It's not as crypto friendly as it used to be. And something that we are really looking into is working with countries that have a clear strategy, a clear plan for where the world is heading. That I believe is towards multipolarization with authoritarian governments and sovereign individuals. And so we basically want to work with these countries that are open to doing business and that are willing to attract sovereign individuals.
So let's say, so you started Baseflow to help move these people who are sovereignty curious, or very motivated to establish a more sovereign life, or just a life as a digital nomad. Maybe they don't think of themselves as I'm a sovereign individual, even if they are. They might just think I would like to remote work in Portugal, or I'd like to move my assets and my crypto to Dubai. If someone's sitting, let's just say they're sitting in Chicago, and they've never really left the United States. They've never even really worked abroad. They've worked around the United States. Maybe they're an American, and they have some ETH and some Bitcoin in their wallet. They've got some savings in their 401k or whatever. They got their American savings, and they just wake up one day, and they've been reading your content. Maybe they've been listening to this podcast, and they just decide, you know what, I'm I'm I actually do want to go to Lisbon or Madeira or Dubai, and they come to your website. From the moment they kind of have that thought to some future where they're completely set up, sovereign, or whatever you want to call it, the kind of the successfully there in Portugal or in the UAE. What happens? What are the steps? And maybe also, like, what are you thinking about in terms of them also just maybe thinking, well, I should just go to a lawyer. Why would I use it? Like, what does the tech startup or the platform of Baseflow do in terms of their experience to get them from A to B?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question, and I think it's all about the experience. I mean, the experience that you currently have if you want to go through one of these legal structures is that essentially you will need to find a lawyer or a law firm or an immigration agency that can help you with this setup that you want to build. That's the first step. After that, you will probably pay some thousands of dollars in consultancy fees, because they will explain you all the different options that you have. You will probably have paralysis by analysis. That's something that I encounter very often when talking with my customers, that they talk with a bunch of lawyers and they offer them like 15 options or 20 options, and they ended up not doing anything because they are like, oh, I have so many options, what do I do? And then after that, it is super inconvenient to make all the bank transfers, bank wires. Many of them, they are international. Then sending all your documents, tracking everything on Excel, and all this experience that is quite outdated. And essentially what we're trying to do is to have this sort of platform that provides a one-stop shop for you to either move your tax residency to another country, like we were saying, you want to move to Portugal and live there, or you just want to set up your tax residency in Dubai, and that's it. So essentially you would be able to just provide the documents that are required, and that's it. So the same way you think about how you incorporate companies nowadays versus how you were incorporating companies like 10, 15 years ago, that you needed to involve lawyers, and it was a really painful process. And right now you have like all these platforms that help you streamline these processes and make it super easy. And so that's essentially what we're trying to do, but for individuals. And also, I think a really key component of it is the network effects, in the sense that someone might move to another country, like you were saying, someone that is in Chicago sitting there. uh, the first step is of course realizing that this is possible, and I think many people don't even think about it nowadays, because they are like, this is not possible, like they don't even think about it. So I think that there's a big advantage in just making it possible for people, like selling it as something that is possible, something that is not only for billionaires or millionaires, that anyone that works remotely can make these kind of choices. And then after that, just make it easy, and like I was saying, have all these sort of network effects where people can not only move their tax residency to another country, but also get another passport and get access to all these services that are useful for them as sovereign individuals. And I think that's the main difference, versus, for example, going to a law firm that is going to help you with the legal stuff, but then you will need to go to a different place for the banking, for the housing, for the private mailbox, and all of that. And then if you move countries, you will have to start from scratch again. So everything is super fragmented, both vertically, in different industries, and horizontally across different geographies.
Got it. Yeah, no, I'm listening to you, Alex, and I'm kind of curious to learn why this particular idea. I mean, listening to you, I can tell, no matter what, you sound like an entrepreneur, and you probably always will be an entrepreneur. But why this particular problem at this time instead of, for instance, a Chat GPT app or any number of other things that are coming along that are really hot right now. This is one of those things where it seems like from my experience in sort of the VC world and the entrepreneurship world, it seems like it's just kind of on the edge of, some people might consider it, oh, this is kind of like a services business. It's not really in the VC world, but it also, on the other hand, is kind of at the inflection point of a total change in the way we do things post COVID. People are working remote. We see all these hot payroll companies that do like the Deal, the Remote, the Oyster, the Multiplier, that do international payroll, and they've raised tons of money. So on the other hand, you might be onto something that's just absolutely ready to explode from a VC point of view. Why did you choose this idea, and like, do you want to raise money for it, or is this just a really profitable, bootstrappable business that you can just kind of run and make cash from? Like, what's your plan there?
First, like, addressing your question regarding if it's VC funded or bootstrapped. So this is the idea is to build something really big, and that's why when I got offered to join Pioneer, that is this startup accelerator that Daniel Gross started. He was a former partner at Y Combinator, and essentially, he went on to build this startup accelerator that is super early stage. So from the moment I started working in Baseflow, I think 2 weeks after that, I got the offer to join Pioneer or something like that, and I accepted it. So we raised the first check, and actually right now, we are in the middle of raising our pre-seed round. So and to explain
And are
this,
you the only founder, or do you have co-founders?
yeah, I'm a solo founder.
Got it.
I'm building also the core team right now. I have a couple people working with me already. But yeah, I mean, like, explaining the reasoning behind that, and that question behind if it is a service business or not. I think it's really interesting what you said, that the world is changing, and I think the world we're heading to, like I said before, it's a world where increasingly more people want to be able to make these decisions around where they live, where they are citizens. They will start probably worrying about the passports that they hold. And for example, Balaji puts it in a really cool way, that is that your allocation, meaning where you put your money, might be important, but your location, meaning where you live, or where you position yourself, is even, or can be even more important in the next years. And I think there's no easy way for sovereign individuals to make decisions around all this kind of stuff, how to structure their finances globally. And we are seeing that the remote trend, I think it's not going anywhere. And even if it's not remote per se, like it was during COVID, I think people are increasingly start to make decisions around this thing, because pre-COVID, there was no question that the place to be was Silicon Valley, especially if you wanted to build a tech startup. But more people moved to Miami, then more people moved to Portugal, to Singapore. Now we are seeing more people moving to Dubai, and to smaller countries like Switzerland, Montenegro, and whatnot. So I think this is a trend, and many trends are converging right now at this very special moment in time. Um, so going back in time, to the question about how did I decide to work on this. So essentially, when I was 14 years old, I got into flag theory. I don't know. Are you familiar with the flag theory?
No.
All right, so it's essentially this theory that says that you should set up your flags in different countries to maximize your freedom, and not depend on just one government, not having a single point of failure using, like a computer
Okay, yeah.
engineer
I take it back.
analogy.
I take it back. I have heard of this. Yeah. It's been a few
Gotcha,
years. I
gotcha.
used to read about that. If it's just it's like Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's like that's a name I've not heard in a long time, but I did read about that 5 or 10 years ago. Um but
Yeah,
I've
so
kind of
it was
forgotten
it
about
was
it. So
yeah,
flag theory is still a big thing, or flag theory is still a concept. I just remember it from forums maybe 10 years ago. So
yeah. I mean,
it's
I
still
got
here.
yeah, like I said, I got into it like 10 years ago. I was 13, 14 years old. And for the people listening, like the flags are just your passport, your tax residency, your assets, and all of that. And you should, put them in different countries to not depend on just one government, maximize your freedom, all of that. So after that, I got into startups. I built my first company during my first year in college. I was a mobile app to finding partners. After that, I did an internship at a San Francisco-based startup, which was building a marketplace for remote workers, and that was kind of the first time that I got into remote work and all of that trend. It was 2019, and then after that, I moved from Spain, where I'm originally from, to the US to study at USC in college, and I experienced the pain of immigrating myself. I got I realized the importance of your passport and your nationality, because this is something that many people from wealthy countries, like Vitalik said some weeks ago, don't even think about, because you don't experience the pain of not being able to access one country, and whatnot. But going through the process of immigrating to a new country myself, I experienced it. And then I had to come back to Europe, because essentially I couldn't renew my visa in the US. So I was researching what were the most attractive places to be. Also at the same time, with the pandemic and the rise of remote work, and digital tribes, internet communities, the rise of the network state, that Balaji coined, and all of those trends kind of converged. And like I was saying, I was researching places to move to in Europe. I found out that Portugal was really attractive with their digital nomad visa. They were making a lot of things right, or at least in the right direction. They were becoming super crypto friendly after the 2008 crisis and all of that. So I was like, okay, I think I will do this myself. So I did it for myself, and I decided to kind of streamline all the process.
And
And like I
Alex,
was saying,
when you say you were moving to Portugal, were you researching that from California or is that from
yes,
Europe? Okay. So
yes,
you were in
yes,
the
yes, yes. I
US
was
and
yes.
so what just saying, I don't want to make sure I didn't miss this like crucial turn in the story. What was motivating you? Like California is a cool place. It's Silicon Valley. There's startup accelerators. There's Pioneer. There's all this stuff going on. Lots of people like all around the world are like, my dream is to get to California. I'll get the H-1B visa or what have you, et cetera, to like get to California and never leave and become a Silicon Valley person for the rest of my life and buy a big house in Palo Alto. What was prompting you to be like, I want to leave California for somewhere in Portugal? What was there
Yeah,
like a
so so
moment?
so
Did you get a tax bill and you're like, or did you get a crypto tax bill and like I'm out of here? Or what was the moment?
so basically, like I think it's a bunch of things, not a single thing that made me want to move back to Europe. So some of them, for example, like when I first moved to the US, I had the intention of staying there and doing like H1B or any other kind of visa that allowed me to stay there long term. But after living some months there, I realized that I didn't like it that much to basically build my life there. Then also I realized that maybe I wasn't getting the best deal out of my money in the US, and that essentially for the same price in Europe, I could live way better. At the same time, I was realizing that I was making way more connections and finding way more opportunities online than in the physical world. I believe this might be a bit different in San Francisco, but especially in LA, I felt that way. Um, and also at the same time, if I wanted to stay, I would have needed to spend a lot of time and a lot of money in lawyers and resources to basically, go through this super painful immigration process. And I didn't feel like it. I thought that, I could allocate my time and my money in other things. And essentially, I had this feeling of, this is not a place that wants me to be here, because they are making it super hard for me to stay here. And also, I think, this goes back, again, to the concept of the sovereign individual, that I think that you should go to a place where you feel loved, or where you feel welcomed, at least. And this is not anything against the US. I love the US. I think it has great things, but I think immigration is not one of them. And honestly, like, if you think about the US, it was a country that was benefits so much from immigration, and it was essentially built by immigrants, and making it so hard for people that want to go there and contribute to the country to actually go there and move there, and not be worrying about, getting deported, or getting a huge tax bill, or paying thousands of dollars, to lawyers. It's a huge problem, and we are seeing that, like, honestly, I'm seeing it with Baseflow. Like, many people that would have chosen the US some years ago, now they are choosing other places, because they are making a living online. They are finding their opportunities, their businesses online, and they are like, okay, I'm gonna move to a place that loves me.
Yeah, this resonates with me. I'm Canadian, so and I've lived in New York and worked in New York on visas and gone through visa applications, and uh, it's just one of those things where even for Canada, and I'm not saying Canada is more special. It is closer to the United States, and there are some things that are streamlined. But I can sympathize with everyone around the world. For many Canadians, even though it feels like it should be as easy as going from Spain to Portugal within the EU, it's not. And so I definitely have had that feeling like, wow, they really, in some cases, it's like they really just don't want people here, even if those people are coming to contribute and pay taxes and commit no crimes and be totally, contributing to society. Uh, they just
You
put
know
up
and,
these
and, and, and,
barriers.
and yeah, no, and especially, like, I think in the world right now, we are increasingly starting to think, from the perspective that governments are businesses, and so, you are paying something in taxes, so you get something back. And honestly, like, the US seems like one of the countries that has the one of the worst, benefit from, or benefit to cost ratio, in the sense that in some places in the US you pay a lot of taxes, and what you get in return is not that much. Of course, like, you get it in other ways, from business opportunities, connections, networking, all of that. But from the standpoint of the government perspective, as a business, as, what you're getting versus what you're paying, I think it's a pretty bad business.
Yeah, it used to be worth it to deal with all the bullshit to get access to this unipolar, monolithic, in-person opportunity to do business in anywhere in America, but in New York,
Yeah,
LA, San Francisco, Silicon
yeah.
Valley. And with everything that's happened the last 3 or 4 years, I think that advantage is eroding. There's so many more places where you can still build an amazing business, and you could do that before, but it's the reality is, no matter how much we don't want to, no matter how anti-American someone can be. I'm not anti-American, but someone can be. The reality was 10 or 20 or 30 years ago, it was absolutely the best place in the world to start a successful growth business. There's no question about that. And I think nowadays there is a question. But I wanted to chat about Zuzalu, but before we get to that, just one more question about Baseflow. So this is at baseflow.io. If anybody's listening and wants to look it up, that's correct, right? Baseflow.io.
Yeah,
I've got it pulled
yeah.
up here. If you
Thanks.
want to navigate it to it on the web. So I'm just curious. When you make a website, when you make the marketing copy for something like this, you mean like anyone can use the platform. It's for everyone, and that's great. And I'm not saying that's what your copy is. I'm just saying, like, often you're marketing like that, but then what you find in reality is, I'm sure you're starting to see this, the target customer tends to start coming from some particular demographic or geography. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, I can imagine there's people in the EU that are like, well, I'm an EU citizen. There's 30 countries or whatever it is, I don't know, 19 countries, I can't remember how many, but there's lots of European countries I can go to with no platform. I just do it, it's part of my passport. Then you've got Americans and Canadians and Australians who are like, yeah, I'm really just in my country and there's not really that many other places I can go. I need a platform like this. And then, of course, there's also a history of, people in India are very motivated, or have been very motivated throughout the last decades to get an H-1B visa and get to America or get somewhere else. That's a very well documented trend. So I guess what I'm trying to say, maybe not very concisely, is, there's all these groups of people, there's different geographies. Do you have a sense of who's going to be the customer for Baseflow? Is it going to be Americans or Europeans, or is it going to be evenly distributed around a lot of different countries?
Yeah, so I would say that it's not so much about geography, but more about preferences. So I would say that 95% of our customers work in tech. Most of them work in crypto, and they are either founders or early employees of a startup. So this also tells you that they are quite risk taking, which I believe is the profile or the typical person that right now is making these decisions. Because let's not lie, like this is not something mainstream right now, and it probably feels like Bitcoin in 2013, right? That it feels like even a bit sketchy to get a passport from a different country or move abroad and stuff like that. And we essentially want to take it mainstream, want to make it super friendly. So I would say that that's the typical person that is using us right now. Of course, across different geographies, there are different preferences too. So, for example, the Europeans that we are working with, maybe they think more about just optimizing taxes because they already have strong passports that if they don't live in their home countries, they are not paying taxes there. Then we have many Americans that think about getting a second passport because they don't want to just depend on the US. Then there are many people from India that just think about living a better life and potentially get a second passport from a country that allows them to have greater travel freedom and all of this stuff. So there are like a bunch of different reasons, but the buyer persona, I would say, that is quite defined, at least right now.
Got it. So it's more psychological, and it's about their orientation towards risk
Yeah.
and crypto and those kinds of things. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and also like I was saying in the beginning, the ones that are feeling the problem the most right now are the ones who work at industries in the edge of technology. So industries that are not yet or are heavily regulated because they haven't been regulated in a long time. So for example, crypto and AI, and the people working in those industries are the ones that are starting to think about these decisions because they are feeling it in their daily lives, because they're like, oh yeah, I work in crypto, am I gonna go to jail if I work in crypto from this country?
Mhm.
So they really feel the pain, but I think the trend is clear, and eventually many people, if not everyone, will start to realize that they can make this kind of choices.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's good that you're working with getting people to countries. I've seen something, and you can correct me if any of the facts seem wrong, but what I've been observing is, first of all, you've mentioned a few concepts. I don't know if we like stopped on them, but you've mentioned the network state and Balaji. And just for anyone that wondered what that is, the network state is a concept that has been that Balaji wrote a book about. Balaji Srinivasan is a big thinker in this space in terms of sovereign individuals and the future of nation states and governance and crypto. There's so much to talk about. I can't summarize it in one sentence, but go look up Balaji. I think he's just at Balaji, Balaji, on Twitter and other places. But essentially, the idea that with cryptocurrencies and other technologies, the nation state that was we've kind of had this concept of the nation state since 1648, since the Treaty of Westphalia in Europe, when the 30 Years' War was over, and the kind of modern European Western nation became a thing, and they exported and colonized that around the world in a long, 200 or 300 year history. And then there were democratic revolutions in France and America. But long story short, since those democratic revolutions in France and America, and then around the world over the next couple hundred years, we haven't really had a fundamental change in how a nation works. So anyway, that was a quick sidebar on the idea that we haven't really changed the operating system of nations. There's lots of people that are thinking about it. Alex, you're thinking about it. Balaji's thinking about it. So just a sidebar for listeners, if you want to go look up network state, you can check that out. But the other point I was going to make was just around moving people to countries. I've seen some of these sovereign cities or new, let's say, network state cities. And one example I find where it seems like it might be a bit of a risk of the model, and it's very early days. Anyone who's doing this is taking a little bit of risk. But down in Honduras, there was a place called, either I think it's Prospera or
Prospera. Yeah,
Prospera,
yeah.
maybe on the accent on the first syllable. And they got approval from the government to have a special economic zone. I think the acronym is ZEFE, ZEFE in my Canadian English, ZEFA. I don't know what it is in Spanish, but I believe it's ZEFE. And what happened was, they started building this. I haven't been down there, but they've been building it out. And then I've seen more recent news articles there. Honduras is a democracy. They have an election, they change the government, and the current government is less friendly to the economic zone, to the point of threatening to shut it down, or just saying you can't have this economic zone. And so what does that mean? What is the economic zone? I don't know all the details, but suffice to say, it's like carving out this area where the regulations or the ability to do business or the zoning is different, more free, more libertarian than the rest of the country. And then it allows people to come from somewhere. And, it's like the old model from China in Macau or Hong Kong, where a certain part of a, civilization gets an economic status. And this goes all the way back to the Portuguese traders in China creating special economic zone in Macau, for instance. So it's a concept with a lot of history. But anyway, Alex, I was just thinking, like, I think what you're doing is good with moving people to countries, because when people go and start these cities, if you were to say, oh, I'm pivoting Baseflow and we're going to start a city, there's just this huge risk that you get into, as much as we all want to like move society forward and explore new models. There's just this huge risk that the country you're in is still like, look, we're the law of the land. We changed our mind. So I'm just curious if you've been following the cities and what you think about that, whether it's Praxis, Prospera, Plumia, all the P's, have you
Yeah,
followed those?
yeah. Yeah, actually, like I'm good friends with Dryden. He was Zuzalu too from Praxis. For the ones who don't know, they're building a city in the Mediterranean, and I think something really cool from the network state concept is the idea of being able to if the host government is not that friendly, okay, so we will just move to a different place. And I think that might be one of the biggest issues with Prospera is that they can't really move somewhere else because they started with the land first. So first they developed all that land, and after that they started looking for people to move there. And so they incurred in this super high setup cost that now they are kind of locked in that land, and if the host government wants to make their life super hard, they can so easily move to a different place. Um, so I think that's one of the most important ideas of the network state. And actually, like I'm really interested, really bullish on special economic zones. That was one of the purposes behind Zuzalu to create or obtain a special economic zone or a special zone in order to have more autonomy for longevity experiments and stuff like that. And I think that's super important because like you were saying, the nation state hasn't been updated in so many centuries, and it's important to just experiment to new governance models to find one that works better than what we have. I think there's room for improvement. And honestly, like going back to Baseflow, the longer vision is that since we allow sovereign individuals and digital nomads and all of these kind of internet communities to interact with nation states, at some point we will have enough leverage to work directly with governments and maybe tell them, hey, why don't you make this special permit or this special economic zone for our people that are moving to this country, that are so much, that are so relevant for your country, that are bringing so much income, that are increasing the GDP by this percentage. And that's my take to do it. but there are like many other ways to do it. And I think, eventually the ones that work best will probably work out. But I think, like I was saying, that it's important to just experiment with these things.
Well, I think it's a good segue into, and I'm going to try and say it like you did. Zuzalu is was very recent. We're recording at the end of May, and Zuzalu was I almost don't know how to describe it. It was a collection of people. It's not a DAO, but it was a gathering of people, a pop up, almost a city pop up, a crypto pop up, a Web3 pop up, a sovereign individual pop up event, but not just an event, something that it seemed to last for weeks and weeks. But let me just back up, and I'll kick it over to you. So, first of all, it was in Montenegro, and Montenegro was a place I first traveled to right at recently, a year and a half ago, whenever it was at the end of the pandemic, or as the pandemic was trailing off. I took a trip to the Mediterranean. I hadn't really been to the Adriatic. I hadn't really been to the Mediterranean ever. I'm trying to think now, but yeah, I had not been to the Mediterranean ever, and I went down the Adriatic coast, and so I was in Dubrovnik in Croatia with a famous old city, and there was an opportunity to just keep going, and so I actually took a it's kind of like an Uber. It was longer than an Uber, but it's kind of like an Uber where the Uber would stop and let me see a few things, and then eventually it would actually cross a border. And so we crossed the border. I believe we left the EU, went into Montenegro. So all of this, for anyone who's listening, doesn't know where Croatia and Montenegro are. If you think about Italy and the Mediterranean, Italy's the boot. There's the Adriatic Sea to the east of Italy, and then there's this beautiful coastline east of Italy. If you just took a boat and just traveled east in a straight line, you would hit this Adriatic coast. So you've got Croatia, Montenegro further down, Albania, Greece, and eventually Greece. You get to that Greek peninsula that's a little further down. Anyway, beautiful area. And I took this trip. I think visitors were still a little bit subdued because the pandemic had just happened. It was not like it was very busy with people, and I didn't consider it a nomad destination. I was almost solo and alone, but the car it sort of went around this winding, almost to me it felt like a James Bond adventure through this winding bay, and came around to this place called Kotor, or the Bay of Kotor, which is beautiful. It looked like I'm from British Columbia in Western Canada, and it looked like the kind of beautiful mountains of Vancouver, or even Norway, except it was hot and in the Mediterranean. So you have these mountains coming down to the bay, and so that was my introduction to the Bay of Kotor in Montenegro, an Adriatic country that's small in terms of population. I think it's less than 1 million people. But I just wanted to set the scene that you've got this location in the Adriatic. It's beautiful, it's beautiful, maybe a little bit lesser known. And then all of a sudden, very recently, in the last few months, I think I saw a couple things. One, Dokwan, the crypto fugitive, was arrested at the capital city, the Podgorica airport, which is the capital city. I can't remember if this was before or after Zuzalu, but I saw Dokwan got arrested, and I also saw Zuzalu was happening, and the organizers, if I can use that word, organizers, I don't know if it was sort of decentralized or if there was an organizing team, they chose Montenegro for this. So I wanted to give my little, background of Montenegro to set the scene, but then Alex, I wanted to kick it over to you to just describe to me, because I still don't think I fully understand, although I was watching some of the content. What was Zuzalu? What happened?
Yeah, that's a great introduction, man. Actually, like I'm a Mediterranean maximalist, and I loved the description. So that's awesome. You mentioned that if it felt like James Bond, and like actually in one of the James Bond movies, I don't know if it's Casino Royale. They put it on the setup of Montenegro, I think in Tibat, but they actually recorded it in Lisbon in the Casino of Cascais. But yeah, and so the thing is, Susalu was defined as a pop-up city. It lasted for like 2 months. I was there the entire time. I came back from it last week, actually. And yeah, there was like an organizing team, some people from the foundation and whatnot. um, I think they just chose Montenegro because, like you were saying, it's a really special country that has a lot of upside. Right now, it's in conversations, I think, to join the EU. They just switched the government after so many years, and the new government has great plans. Honestly, like they will try to make it more crypto friendly with a new crypto regulation, also with some talent visas that will make it easier for talented people that work in tech or in biotech or longevity and stuff like that on the edge to move there and work from there. So I think Montenegro is a really special place, and it has so many potential and so many opportunities. And I think that that's probably one of the reasons why it was chosen for Susalu. um and yeah,
I
talking
totally
more.
agree. Can I just jump back to one thing,
Yeah, please,
just
please.
before I lose the thread? You mentioned a pop up city for 2 months. What does that actually look like? Is that essentially just saying to people, we're all going to be here? Buy your ticket, you get your accommodation, Airbnb, hotel, stay with a friend, get a co living space, and just we're all going to hang out? Or is there something more to it than what is the pop? And is it like a secret? There's a few different cities, there's more than a few, there's lots of cities, but it's like you're not saying I don't know what am I trying to say. It's like I didn't hear the name of the act. Like normally you would say something is in Lisbon or Orlando, or the conference is in Las Vegas or whatever it is. And people kept saying like, come to Zuzalu, and I'm like, I would read like 20 tweets, and I know some of the cities and towns in Montenegro, and I would read like 20 tweets and I'd be like, I still don't know which town this is in. Was it distributed across a bunch of different cities? Like what does that mean for the two
It
month
was
pop-up city?
Yeah, it was just one place. I think they tried to keep it, more or less secret.
I
So
see. Okay, so
random people didn't show up, but it was essentially like a resort, in Montenegro,
got it. Okay,
and
so
they
it's
were
being a
just
bit
trying to.
discreet, to just to not call out the city and have randos show up.
Exactly,
And yeah,
exactly. But it,
okay.
it was none of the main cities. It was like some kilometer drive from one of the main cities. So I don't know. They just try to keep it low key. So especially like after it started, after the first 3-4 weeks, uh, it got hyped on Twitter and all of that. So they try to keep it low key, so random people were not showing up and whatnot. Um, but yeah, it was really interesting because especially in the beginning we didn't have a lot of information about what was going on. It was essentially like you described, like, hey, we're gonna be in Montenegro for 2 months. We're gonna be, we are just people that are interested in these topics, and the topics that they sent, that were the topics about which they made like thematic weekends after that. So there were, network states, uh, crypto XAI, longevity, symbio, and all of these kind of topics. And it was like, if you are interested in this and you want to spend 2 months living in Montenegro with like-minded people that are also interested in this, come join. And people could apply. There were also some organizations that had some invites for people. It was kind of, spontaneous, I would say. And yeah, it was like how Vitalik explained it. It was like, okay, so hacker houses last for some months, but it's a small number of people. Conferences last for some days, but it's a big number of people. So let's make something in the middle that is 2 months and a couple of hundred people, and let's see
And
how that goes.
did Vitalik organize this? Is it from, was he part of the sort of decentralized organizing team, or
Yeah, yeah, I would say that he's the mastermind, or at least one
got
of
it?
them behind this, because like he's really interested, I believe, in network states and all of this stuff that is happening. And he just wanted to gather a group of people in real life and actually do something in the real world, and learn from that. So I think it was a really cool experiment. There were like many people involved in the organization that did a great job. So also I think they try to keep it low key, so people were not just coming for the hype or to network. And like, to be completely transparent, that was one of my main criticisms. That is that after some weeks and after it got so hyped, it stopped being or feeling so authentic or intimate, because I got this feeling that people were coming more like as they go to a conference to network and all of that, instead of just going there because you are interested in these topics and just living in a certain way with a certain group of people.
Right. So I guess, I mean, that was actually kind of giving me my next question, which is just, do you see this model? So Zuzalu happened in Montenegro. It was quite long, 2 months. That's a long time. I mean, it's not a long time if you're going to relocate somewhere, but like compared to a 3-day conference, that's a much longer time. And do you see this model working? Let's say someone wanted to do a pop-up city on sovereign individualism in Dubai or Abu Dhabi or Singapore or the Central America. Would you be excited about that? Would you go for a month? And what did you learn from Zuzalu? It sounds like you've got like some minor criticisms, or just what happened. Certain things evolve, and you learn from it. But is this something where you're like, wow, this model, it's going to take off? There's going to be pop-up cities happening all year round. Anytime you wake up in the morning, you can decide next month I'm going to a pop-up city and it's going to happen. Or was it kind of more like, this is an interesting experiment, but you know, I don't know if it'll take off as a
Yeah,
concept.
I think it's an interesting experiment for sure. I don't know if the pop-up city model per se is the right one, especially because you would need to relocate every couple months, and I think that's not for everyone, especially
Mm-hmm.
as you have kids and all of that. For example, there were many people that couldn't come for the entire 2 months because they had families and they have kids and all of that. So
Yeah.
they couldn't commit to move to a new place for 2 months, especially if you are moving it around. You make it harder for people
Right.
to go there unless they are digital nomads. So I mean, sure, you can make like a pop-up city in different locations for digital nomads, but for you know other topics, I would see that as an increased complexity
Yeah.
versus
It-
a feature. And honestly, like one of the things I'm most excited about is Susalu being somewhere long term, and basically full time, and you can just get in, get out as you see fit. Because like I'm one of these people that say that I would be down to live in Susalu full time, or at least spend maybe 3 6 months per year there, and that would be cool. Like we found a great community. I think we were happy, interacting with each other and whatnot. So yeah, I don't know about the future. I don't know if they're gonna make another pop-up city in a different place, or if they are looking for a permanent place to start it again. I don't know. I think it was a good experiment, and like I said, I mean, also like I feel like with all of the hype and all of that, it gets a bit you know overhyped in the sense that people start thinking about second intentions and what is behind this and all of that. And I think the reality is much simpler than that. It's just like you said in the beginning. I mean, it's actually some people that are interested in a set of topics, and they decide to go spend some time together, living together and discussing those topics. Like the Hacker House example, I think it's a great one. It's just people that are interested in something decide to go live together, but this is on a bigger scale from the number of people, and on a smaller scale from the amount of time.
yeah, I'm in my 30s now, and I've gone through that. I'm well through the cycle of there was a time, last decade, and when I was a bit younger, where any opportunity to network or any opportunity to build a network, I could take it at a drop of a hat. And now I just feel a little bit more selective, or I'm not going to travel all the time for everything just to meet people, or build a network. And especially with so many things can be done from home, fundraising, working, almost everything can be done from a laptop now. But I think that that's a bit of a trap, in the sense that it's still like with Zuzalu, with all kinds of things, with conferences, it's still there's nothing beats sitting with someone at dinner and talking about ideas, and it's not the same as kind of sending them a Discord message. I find it is, as much as you can do so much over Discord, over just network communication. So when did Zuzalu end? When was that over? Did you stay the whole 2 months?
Yeah, I left like a couple days before it officially ended, just
Yeah,
because flight connections and all of that. But it officially ended on May 25th, and it started on March 25th.
got it.
So
And
yeah,
so
I stayed.
did you come away, did you learn anything? Were you sitting somewhere where you're like, oh my god, I learned something about layer 2 Ethereum, or I learned something about how AI is going to affect this, that was almost like a nugget of wisdom? Or was it not, was it more just about meeting people? Were there kind of like, I don't know, not secret talks, but were there kind of like privileged, very interesting talks where it's almost like you could only get it there, and you learn something that's almost like a new knowledge that the rest of the world doesn't know? Did it feel like that?
I mean, I would say in some way it felt like that, but just because, every week there were like, thematic weekends. So, for example, on the longevity weekend, Brian Johnson like gave a talk, and then on the network state weekend, Balaji gave a talk. So you had, all these experts in their fields talking about what they know best. So in some way, it felt like that, and you basically had access to all of this knowledge as you wanted. But then also, I think that the biggest value was essentially being able to co-live with other like-minded people, and like you were saying, go have dinner and have an interesting conversation. And I think, even if I'm very bullish on remote work and all of that, I think there's a lot of value in real life and living in an environment that makes you flourish. And that's how I felt during those 2 months. So, and I think many people felt the same way, so I think it was great.
Do you consider yourself a digital nomad? Do you follow the digital nomad movement and listen to digital nomad thought leaders on LinkedIn and Twitter, and listen to remote work podcasts? And
I mean, all,
do you consider that? I think that's slightly different than, there's a sovereign individual, and I almost see that there's these worlds that they overlap. But on the one hand, there's like libertarians, people that are kind of in the nomad capitalist crypto world, and then there's digital nomads who are interested in, but they're not, they overlap, but they're not totally the same. They have different values and many of the same values. So I'm
yeah, I
just
mean,
curious if you consider yourself that way.
yeah, I think one of the biggest problems of the sovereign individual concept is that it's very tied with politics and ideology. But if you ask me, like, I think all digital nomads are sovereign individuals. Maybe this is a bit of a hot take, but in the end, sovereign individuals are just individuals that are choosing and making decisions. And digital nomads are deciding to spend some weeks or some months in different countries. If you ask me if I consider myself a digital nomad, I wouldn't say that I don't, because I like to have a base or have multiple bases and then move across those and not travel permanently. I think maybe I'm wrong, but the concept of digital nomad is essentially not having a base and just nomading around. So I don't consider myself a nomad. Maybe a slow mad, because I spent some months, like I spent 2 months in Montenegro, then 3 months in Portugal, then maybe 1 month in Turkey or whatnot. So I don't consider myself like a nomad per se. But yeah, I would consider myself a sovereign individual because I think I'm consciously making decisions around where I live and where I pay taxes, where I'm a citizen, all that kind of stuff. That I think also digital nomads do.
Well, we're coming up on the hour. I wanted to ask one kind of open-ended, fun question as we get to the end of frankly, this has been an amazing interview. I learned things about Zuzalu and Baseflow. I think I knew some of it intellectually, but it's been really great to hear some of the nuance and color from you. I think I understand Zuzalu a lot better now, having talked to you. But the thing I was going to ask is, let's say someone comes in, let's say someone's been very fortunate. They've got $3 to $5 million. They sold their startup, or their crypto did well, and they can choose 3 or 4 places. I don't want to make it too strict, but 3 or 4 places around the world, or 1 or 2. What's your version? Like, let's say you got a couple million to buy some condos and set up your bases. What's, like, in a year, what's your optimal places to go where you have bases? Is it 3 months, 3 months, 3 months? Do you have a base, 1 base or 3 bases? What would you do? Like, 5 years, you sell Baseflow for $400 million. No, that's too much money. I need to give you a constraint. You sell it, you're going to do way better than this. But let's say you sell it for $4 million, but you're going to sell it for more. But let's say you sell it for $4 million. So you can buy a couple condos, but you can't, like, buy 10 mansions. Where would you set up your life? Do you have a dream there?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that definitely Portugal. I think it's a great place. Also, like in terms of cultural lifestyle, is very similar to where I grew up in Spain. So Portugal will definitely be one of them. Then, you know, I had a really specific experience in Montenegro, but I really like Eastern Europe, and especially Montenegro being near the ocean. I think if things go well, especially on the regulatory side, it can have like a really good future and become maybe the Singapore of Europe. So I would say Montenegro as the second one. Um, and then probably, I would like to go to Southeast Asia. I haven't been able to visit Singapore and all of those cool places around there. So, I'm not gonna choose any of those because I haven't been able to visit them. So I don't know yet. And then, in the US, I really like Southern California, not LA, but I really like north of San Diego, Encinitas. I don't know if you're familiar with it, Cardiff and
Hmm.
all of that. I really
Yep.
like surfing. I think weather is great, and maybe spending like a couple months per year there would be nice. So yeah, I'm gonna stick to those.
That's great. That sounds like an awesome combo. Yeah, I'm in the same boat in the sense of I have a lot of opinions and experience around North America, Canada, and the U.S., also Mexico. Not as much Mexico, but Central America, Europe. But I to my except for maybe one layover or like literally just a day in Hong Kong when I was traveling somewhere, and also except for Dubai, I haven't been to East Asia or Asia or India or anywhere sort of in South or Southeast or East Asia for any amount of time. So that's a huge blank spot in my travel knowledge and my kind of base knowledge. So I in 2024 I want to spend some time there. I hope, but same boat where I can't really have an opinion on Asia. But I agree with what you're saying. Maybe one last question, just because I've been thinking about it this whole hour as I've been talking to you, and I just wanted to like clarify it. So you're from Spain, but you say Portugal is a great place. You would want to go there because it's like Spain. Why not just Spain? Is there something specific about Portugal? Is it the tax laws? Is it just the culture? Is it the cost of living? Why not, just Spain? It's and I'm saying this like I'm kind of pretending to be ignorant, like, hey, I'm just stupid. I'm from North America. Aren't they right beside each other? Doesn't Spain have beautiful weather and beaches and food and culture and people? What's the thing that Portugal has maybe that's attractive compared to
Yeah,
Spain?
it does. Like, all of those things are great in Spain. Don't get me wrong. But I think that Portugal is a bit more international, like in the sense, for example, like all my friends that work in crypto, they moved to Portugal, they moved to Lisbon. So, besides San Francisco, Lisbon is the place where I felt like I could live near all of these people that have the same interests as I do, especially that work in tech, work in crypto, and all of that. Um, and yeah, and then of course you have the tax financial side of things that as a foreigner you are way better off living in Portugal than in Spain. Again, if you are Portuguese, you are not that good living in Portugal tax wise, but you are better off moving to Spain. And the same in Spain, like if you are Spanish, you are not that good tax wise living in Spain, but if you are a foreigner, it's a bit better. So yeah, I would say that that's mainly it. And also, regarding the lifestyle, I really like surfing. And waves are great in Lisbon. They're also great in northern Spain, but the weather is not that good. So Lisbon is warm year round, like LA. So I really like it.
Yeah, and I hear that more and more. I'll talk to someone about a country, and what it comes down to is often, hey, we're talking not talking about countries, we're talking about cities, and there's
Yeah.
neighborhoods, special neighborhoods in Lisbon. People are doing things, so it's not so much like why did you move to America? It's like why did you move to New York? Well, it's New York, and I hear that about Lisbon. It's like why Portugal? Well, hey, let me tell you about Lisbon, and
Yeah.
in some cases Madeira as well. So that's good. I mean, it's a great way to end. Lisbon is a hub for this growing movement, the remote work movement, the digital nomad movement, and the sovereign individual movement. All of these movements are going to generate people that are likely present and future customers of Baseflow. knock on wood, hundreds of thousands of them, millions of them, so you can buy all these places in San Diego, sell Baseflow, or keep IPO Baseflow, whatever you want to do, and live in all these places around the world, and we can meet up in person sometime. And I can't wait till my next trip to Lisbon. So I will see you around the bend. And Alex, it's just been awesome having you on the podcast.
Awesome, Curtis. Thank you so much.